When we first found the lanes, we thought we had reached history, not our history, the greater one. The old, crowded river of stars, from which we had always been absent. For 3 centuries, humanity had climbed alone along the cold outer dark, system by system, learning to live where the galaxy thinned into long black distances and poor yellow suns. We had no ruins older than our own, no relay beacons left by vanished gods, no patrons. Every habitat, every drive, every sealed field of wheat spinning under alloy sky had been paid for in mathematics, pressure leaks, radiation burns, and generations who died in transit so their grandchildren could arrive. Then our survey vessels dropped inward along a gravitic shear no human instrument had predicted, and found a traffic lattice older than any human nation by lengths of time our languages handled badly. There were stations built inside captured magnetospheres. There were suns dimmed by engineered veils. There were freight organisms kilometers long, drifting in disciplined schools through hard vacuum, each wrapped in electromagnetic harnesses and carrying ore, water, flesh, and tribute. And there were minds, not one galactic civilization, never one. A layered ecology of powers, dependencies, client species, managed species, broken species, and things so old they no longer seem to distinguish government from appetite. The first elder envoys we met were the Thren. They arrived as branching structures of wet black crystal suspended in fields of blue force, each branch lined with cilia that tasted charge and motion. They did not speak in words until they had built an acoustic model of us. Before that, they communicated by changes in polarization and low-frequency harmonic pressure that made our teeth ache. Their ships were not ships in the human sense, but pressure-balanced hollows grown around superconductive organs. When they regarded us, it felt less like being greeted than sampled. They welcomed us. That was the word in translation. It was not what they meant. The Thren informed us that humanity had emerged in an administratively marginal exterior volume, and was therefore eligible for supervised admission into the concord of ordered species under the stewardship of the elder blocks. We were congratulated on achieving interstellar function without guidance. We were assigned an observer mission. We were requested to submit developmental records, military inventories, population distributions, and all known transit vectors. In return, we would be granted protected status and formal recognition of a bounded territorial allotment. Their map of our allotment did not include half the systems we already occupied. Our delegation assumed there had been some error. There had not. The omitted systems, the Thren explained, lay beyond our authorized growth frontier. Human presence there would be considered provisional until reviewed for contraction. Expansion by emergent species was regulated for stability. Military tonnage above prescribed ratios was forbidden. Autonomous high-energy fabrication outside declared worlds was forbidden. Independent relay construction beyond frontier markers was forbidden. Contact with non-compliant junior species was forbidden without elder arbitration. We asked why. The Thren branches shivered in soft blue light. Through our translators came the answer. Because unregulated proliferation creates wars of maturation. Because younger intelligences do not comprehend long balances. Because the elder species had paid in blood to establish limits. Because containment was mercy, we accepted. Outwardly, immediately, politely, we accepted. That was the first thing the galaxy learned wrong about us. The second was older and more dangerous. They asked how long it had taken us to rise from combustion chemistry to space industry, from first computation to orbital settlement, from orbital settlement to extrasolar habitation. We lied, not clumsily. Not by a factor of 2. We inserted centuries where there had been decades. We made our progress look difficult in the ordinary galactic way, diffuse and slow, as if human advancement had spread like lichen instead of fire. The reason was simple. Even in those first meetings, all was already souring into unease. We saw a procession over Kelet's spiral, where a dependent species called the Yuvan had failed a mineral quota after a flare season damaged 3 of their extraction moons. The elder response was not negotiation, it was demonstration. Their habitats were open to vacuum 1 in every 20, selected by lot and broadcast across the trade lattice. The survivors were ordered to continue shipment schedules, using the metals stripped from their dead stations. We saw a nursery world of filament-bodied Pelari, bright things who lived in methane mist and sang by electric discharge, declared ecologically massacred after surveyors found trace rare isotopes in its crust. The Conquered transferred the planet to a client consortium under Thren's supervision. The Pelari were relocated in atmospheric cages. Half died in transit because their songs required storm gradients the cages could not reproduce. No one hid these acts. They were not scandals, they were law. The elder powers were not empires in any human historical sense. They had no need to pretend to mutual dignity. The Thren cultivated dependency, the way a reef cultivates filter life. The Eskar, who moved in braided combat swarms and thought through consensus predation, culled border populations whenever demographic curves suggested future resistance. The Iller fold, beings spread across quantum-linked tissue vaults, treated lesser species as strategic variables and occasionally trimmed variants by sterilizing entire habitats with tailored neutrino washes. Everywhere we traveled inward, the same pattern emerged. The young were confined, their fleets were stunted, their science was monitored. Any species that became too coherent, too ambitious, too technically agile suffered correction. Sometimes a world vanished, sometimes its leaders did. Sometimes a generation of children was taken as labor collateral into life support manufactories. They would never leave. We came from the edge, from long distances and sparse stars. To them, that meant we came from irrelevance. That mistake kept us alive. We reduced visible shipbuilding. We declared decommissionings that never happened. We submitted censored demographic reports. Frontier stations officially dismantled went dark, then deeper dark, all emissions erased as they were rebuilt inside ice moons, rogue planets, dust-shrouded belts. We shifted industry outward and downward, into cometary caverns, beneath ocean crusts, into heat sinks hidden under the waste signatures of ordinary fusion grids. We complied so completely, it became insulting. Human diplomats learned the forms of deference. Human traders mastered tariffs written in 6 incompatible biologies. Human historians produced careful, harmless summaries of our past, with all the dangerous compression removed. Human engineers bought licenses for obsolete field systems and thanked the elders for them, while our hidden laboratories solved the principles underneath and went further. Because once we had seen their machines up close, we understood another thing very quickly. They were old, not weak, not foolish. But old in the way deep predators become old, optimized around a world they had ruled too long. Their drives favored established lanes and mass concentration. Their command structures assumed fear would slow opponents. Their industries were centralized because no one had dared strike at their cores in millennia. Their weapons were magnificent and doctrinally rigid. Their sensors looked hardest where history told them danger lived, toward the thick center and the contested corridors, not out in the neglected dark where humanity had learned to survive by redundancy, improvisation, and speed. We did not merely copy, we studied constraints. Our propulsion teams built field-ripple drives that could step across lane geometry instead of depending on it. Our manufacturing swarms learned to turn unpromising rock and gas into war materiel in weeks. Our command systems fused human strategic doctrine with machine prediction and decentralized execution, so fleets could break apart, vanish, and recombine faster than elder battle nets could model. Our defenses stopped trying to match enemy firehead for firehead and instead bent battles around uncertainty, delay, spoofed mass, false thermal bloom, and sudden overmatch at chosen points. We built hidden fleets, then hidden fleets to support hidden fleets, and then the buried industrial skeleton that would let us lose worlds and keep fighting. All the while, the galaxy taught us patience. It taught us through insult first. A rescue convoy carrying 6,000 human colonists out of a reactor-failing spin habitat requested emergency lane priority near a Thren-administered junction. Priority was denied because a tribute caravan from a client world had schedule sanctity under Elder Seal. Our convoy drifted out of intercept geometry. By the time alternate tugs arrived, 11 compartments had frozen and the rest had asphyxiated behind jammed bulkheads. The Thren adjudicator transmitted a formal regret and a surcharge for unauthorized distress beacon saturation. We did not respond. Then they took a world. Cynosure was a marginal human-settled system in the inner reaches, legally registered, agriculturally productive, nothing strategically dramatic except position. The Iller Fold reclassified it as a biospheric support reserve for one of their tissue vault chains and presented the decree as final. Human settlers were given 90 days to evacuate. When they refused, believing law and registration might still matter, fold sterilization, ships flooded the upper atmosphere with catalytic dust and microbial collapse packages. We pulled out as many as we could. We watched orchards blacken from orbit. We listened to the governor of Cynosure ask our embassy whether the Concord Charter meant anything at all. We still did not respond, not openly. Privately, shipyards accelerated, stockpiles thickened. The list of names to be remembered grew longer. The worst before the end was the Verk suppression. The Verk were not human. They were a low-gravity species shaped like radial fans of cartilage and translucent muscle, moving through air and water with equal grace, communicating by color pulses and pressure harmonics through the skin. We had met them through forbidden channels and traded medicine, reactor ceramics, and agricultural microbiomes. They had 3 habitable worlds, and no legal right to defend any of them beyond patrol scale. Their offense, in elder terms, was obvious. Their child mortality had dropped, their metallurgy had improved. Their orbital launch volume was rising too quickly. A Escar swarm descended without declaration. They did not conquer, they corrected. Orbital habitats were pierced and left to vent. Breeding seas were salted with replicating toxins keyed to Verk biochemistry. Population knots judged, future strategic surplus, were herded into thermal shelters and flash-cooked when the shelter skins were overloaded from orbit. The Escar broadcast the operation as a balance restoration, a lesson to neighboring species against unsanctioned acceleration. Human relief ships moved to intervene and were warned off under conquered arms limitations. If we persisted, our vessels would be considered co-belligerent with a non-compliant junior polity. We stopped at the line. I have lived long enough to say this plainly. It is one of the great shames of our species, and one of the reasons the war ended as hard as it did. We stopped because it was not yet time. We stopped because command judged, correctly, that open battle there would trigger a premature coalition strike against a humanity not fully ready. We stopped while billions died in waters that turned black. The footage came home. The pressure songs of Verk families trapped under boiling canopies came home. So did the silence afterward. That was when the debate inside our own governments ended. We had endured because we intended to survive. After Werk, survival alone was no longer a sufficient national objective. The order itself had to end. Still, we tried law before war. By then we had strength no elder census imagined. Not certainty of victory, not yet, but enough to risk speaking without trembling. Human delegations appeared in chamber after chamber across the inner lattice, on trade moons, in arbitration shells, in the lightless neutral vaults where the fold preferred to project legal abstractions. We submitted evidence archives of exterminatory punishment, population culls, forced territorial caps, seizure decrees, technological suppression schedules. We named species broken in the name of stability. We demanded binding sovereignty for younger civilizations, abolition of tribute systems, protection for humanitarian contact, verified limits on punitive fleet action, and independent transit rights beyond elder monopolies. We spoke too clearly. That was our final offense. The elders had tolerated human usefulness, human diligence, even human discomfort. What they could not tolerate was a contained species, naming the structure of the cage out loud. Their answer came at Talaris Gate. Talaris was a human-administered civilian hub deep in the inner network, crowded, lawful, visible, chosen precisely because it lay under multiple diplomatic guarantees. 8 million permanent residents, another 4 million transients, hospitals, schools, dry docks. Refugee quarters for 3 client species. We had been helping in quiet defiance of elder restrictions. The Thren, the Escar, and the Illerfold issued a joint censure at local dawn cycle. Humanity was declared destabilizing. Talaris was designated an unlawful nexus of contagion, material support, and anti-order agitation. Evacuation was neither offered nor discussed. The first strike was against the station's shield harmonics, not to disable them quickly, but to force emergency draws and lock evacuation traffic in berth. Then came the relativistic debris lances. Then the gamma bloom from a collapsed fuel reserve, hit by precision fire. The habitat ring broke in 6 places. Atmospheric plumes flashed white into vacuum, carrying schools, gardens, bodies, paper, blood, and molten aluminum into the black. Rescue sectors launched automatically and were cut apart as examples. The refugee spindle survived for 11 minutes before Escar cutters opened it from end to end. They broadcast the destruction in all major trade bands. The message was not to us, not really. It was to every contained species that had listened when humanity spoke. This is what happens, the elder powers said, when the young mistake moral language for protection. We received the casualty estimates in waves, because there were too many dead for immediate certainty. By the 4th day the number passed 9 million, then humanity went quiet, no denunciation, no emergency appeal, no threats, no visible mobilization. Our merchant traffic disappeared from elder lanes. Human embassies transmitted a single acknowledgement of receipt and shut down. Advisors left junior courts overnight, medical missions folded, research exchanges terminated, freight contracts lapsed. At stations where human communities had lived for decades, apartments stood open and empty, meals cooling on tables, plants still lit by domestic lamps. Patrol craft sent to inspect some outer human relay points found dead metal shells and no personnel. Others found nothing at all, only cold vacuum and false signatures where installations had supposedly once been. Across the galaxy, interpretations diverged, some celebrated. They said the upstart edge species had finally understood reality, some worried. Species that had suffered under elder rule recognized coordinated withdrawal when they saw it, and began hiding food, fuel, and children. The elder blocks, supremely sure of their own reading, prepared a punitive expedition toward the human exterior. They believed they were pursuing a wounded actor, retreating to provincial redoubts. They entered our dark on schedule. I watched the first battle from a command vault under the ice of Nyssa, a moon no elder map acknowledged. We had hidden 22 fleet masses in that system alone, dispersed through cryovolcanic fissures, under regolith lids, inside sculpted debris fields that mimicked natural clutter. Beyond Nyssa were 47 more fortified nodes the enemy did not know existed, linked by drives they had never seen and supplied by industry they had never counted. When the Elder Vanguard translated in, they did so in doctrinal order, lane-aligned, density-centered, radiating confidence. Their lead ships were colossal and terrible, all curved armor and field organs, Escar warbraids nested under Thren command platforms, fold logic lances phased in rear support. We let them advance. Their long-range solutions began failing first. Target masses split into ghosts, thermal blooms multiplied, distances folded wrong. Then our first strike wave arrived not from the front, but from vectors their models had discarded as physically inaccessible. Human spearcraft stepped across local curvature in bursts so sharp, the enemy arrays classified them as sensor faults until impacts rippled through 3 command echelons at once. We hit logistics before battleships. Tankers, field tenders, computation hubs, ammunition wombs. We collapsed command coherence. Then we cut the blinded heavy ships apart with relativistic needle storms and shaped gravitic shear that peeled armor like wet bark. Their return fire was immense, but aimed at where we had been. Our fleets did not hold lines. They swarmed, vanished, recombined. Every ship captain had mission authority. Every battle net assumed local severance and fought on. By the time the Elder Rear realized this was not an ambush but a different level of war, their supply spine was gone, and the outer dark around them had awakened into 1,000 hidden suns. That was the revelation. Humanity had not hidden strength, we had hidden scale. Shipyards erupted across the exterior in open light. Mining belts lit like necklaces of fire. Entire asteroids unfolded into foundries. Reserve fleets emerged from gas giant shadows, from hollow moons, from black-buddy docks sunk in comet clouds. For decades we had wrapped our growth in silence because concealment was armor. Now concealment fell away, and the galaxy saw what patience had built. The second Elder offensive never reached our borders. We met it halfway, inside lanes we had remapped and no longer respected. We broke their junction monopolies. We severed the relay cathedrals through which the Thren coordinated tribute. We struck fold tissue vaults with precision packages that left archives intact and strategic breeding matrices dead. We hunted Escar brood forges and command queens across 6 sectors and burned only those military nests that kept the war moving. That mattered. Rage ran through the fleet like current, but it had shape. Talaris was remembered in every operation order, and so was Verk, Cynosure, Kelat, all the rest. We did not answer massacre with massacre. We answered invincibility with extinction of its mechanisms. The galaxy responded faster than even our planners had hoped. Contained species stopped obeying interdictions. Tribute caravans vanished into mutiny. Fuel depots detonated from within. Entire client flotillas defected after a single secure packet, showing the first Elder Armada broken in the outer dark. The Pelari sabotaged atmospheric processors on worlds stolen from them, and rose singing through methane storms under human air cover. Yuvan labor fleets turned ore haulers into kinetic bombardment craft and rammed Thren extraction moons. What had looked like human war became, in months, general insurrection. That was the true end of the old order. Not any one battle, though there were many. Not even the fall of the conquered central arsenals, when our strike groups stepped past their perimeter lattice and shut down 1,000,000 years of accumulated terror in 17 minutes. The end came when the lesser civilizations of the galaxy understood the elders could bleed, retreat, and beg. I was present in one of the final surrender chambers, though chamber is a human word, and the place deserves none. It was an iller legal manifold, a cold field in which arguments existed as light structures, and every species had to wear mediating translation rigs just to remain sane. The surviving elder blocks proposed terms that still assumed hierarchy, quarantined sovereignty, managed demilitarization for rebels, preserved strategic privileges for legacy stabilizers. We refused. Not because humanity meant to rule in their place. By then, we had already learned the central lesson too well. No species, however clever, however wounded, however righteous in victory, could be allowed to hold the galaxy by the throat. So the settlement was harder than conquest and stranger than revenge. The elder species were disarmed in layers, their monopolies broken, their strategic industries distributed under multinational oversight they could not dominate. Tribute systems were abolished. Frontier caps were voided. Every younger civilization gained transit rights, independent defense rights, and the right to mutual aid without elder permission. Extermination doctrine, demographic correction strikes, sterilization campaigns, and collective orbital punishment were not merely banned. The infrastructure that had made them easy was dismantled. Relay control became federated. Fleet tonnage disclosures became universal. Hidden arsenals were hunted without regard to ancestry or past status. Humanity accepted limits too. That surprised many. It was meant to. We had not fought to inherit the cage. There are still scars. Whole peoples are gone and cannot be restored by law. Oceans remain poisoned. Rings remain broken. In some sectors, children still grow up in habitats welded from war salvage, under memorial plaques too long to read in one sitting. Justice is never clean after ages of predation. But there is a difference now between danger and order. Danger persists. Order no longer requires kneeling. Sometimes I think back to the first map the Thren placed before us, the one that tried to define humanity as a manageable perimeter on the far edge of things. They looked outward and saw emptiness, distance, sparse stars, delayed relevance. What they did not understand was what distance had made of us. On the edge, there had been no one to save us, no one to slow us, no one to tell us that suffering granted authority or that age granted the right to feed on the young. We had crossed the dark alone and arrived late to a galaxy already organized around fear. We learned its shape. We bent without breaking. We hid our fire until the time for hiding ended. And when the silence lifted, the outer rim, which the old powers had treated as a dim and negligible border, burned bright enough to remake the night.